I appreciate you coming today. I want to start off by first thanking Chris and Jake for putting on such an amazing event and having us all here. Running a conference is not easy. It's something I've helped with for many, many years, and it doesn't matter how many times you do it or how much you think you've got it dialed in. It is always a shit show. So Jake, I see you in back. I don't see Chris, but thank you for all your hard work. My speech today is something that is near and dear to my heart. If you've ever watched me speak before, you've probably watched me stand on stage and talk about breaking into banks or lockpicking or ethical espionage or something else. But during the pandemic, I've really had a lot of time to sit back and kind of reflect and think about what we were doing in the industry that was wrong or right. And that kind of is why I ended up creating this speech and this topic. It is something that we do every day at my job. But at the same time, I wanted to start talking to people in the industry because I found it very interesting that almost everything I show you, I think, is just not only common knowledge, but it's pretty much accepted as, the way things are done, the way things go in the industry. But what really blew my mind was the more I talked to people about this, the more I found that that wasn't the case. So I thought I'd throw together kind of a fun slide deck. I will apologize in advance for my language. I tend to forget that I need to be good about not cussing. And moreover, I apologize for the fact that I'm going to spend a lot of time making fun of all of us. So with that, my name is Luke McOmie. For those of you who don't know me, most of the industry calls me Pyro. I have worked in this industry since 1994. I have founded multiple companies focused in offensive security and teams. Wrote books, did Sky Talks, was the founder of Sky Talks, which you guys have probably attended at DEF CON before, been involved in 303 Security Tribe, blah, 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 all the different stuff that's on there. But really, what I'm trying to say in this slide is that even though I have always had a bit of a red team focus in the industry, the larger work that I do is actually helping government agencies, large corporations, small businesses that are just getting started off. I help them design better programs around how they execute and operate as a secure organization. So, in the next hour, we're going to discuss the challenge of what we're dealing with in the industry right now and why this stuff is so damn hard. We're going to talk about why some of the old ways are not necessarily the best ways. We'll talk about changing our mindset and approach. We're going to talk about things that we've focused on that are the wrong metrics for success. And then we're going to address things like budget, time, capabilities, upper limits. You can read the slide. So the challenge that comes up when I talk to people about programmatic security, this is not something where we're just walking into a business and saying, do you have a firewall? Do you have a vulnerability management program? Do you do pen testing? This is more of going in and visiting with businesses to become intimate with the way that they operate and understanding the functionality of how the company does what it does and how they have become profitable or successful, or give them a path towards that. And that is a hell of a lot harder than going in and telling somebody with a list of a Nessus scan, here's a whole bunch of vulnerabilities you need to go fix. So we started thinking about new ways to approach this. And one of the things that made it really frustrating right off the bat is we realized we've been doing it wrong for a really long time, like a really long time. So, audience participation, and I need you all to be loud. This has been a quiet crowd so far, so we're going to have some fun, okay? Why do you have a security program? Yell it out. Good, keep them coming, come on. Okay, yep, I hear compliance because we have to, all kinds of good stuff. You're right. Why do you conduct assessments? Because we have to. That is my favorite answer almost every single time. PCI is good too, if you just want to look at an absolutely teeny tiny part of your network called the CDE and then say, I don't care about everything else that exists in the environment, but we're secure because PCI says we are. How often do you perform pen testing? Tell me, how often? Your companies, be honest. Twice a year, once a year. I heard somebody who said continuous. Who was that? Props. Nice work, nice work. I want to hear more about how you're doing it, but that's a lot of what we're talking about today. How often do you change up your security provider? Oh, this is one of my favorites. I love when I sit down in front of a board of a bunch of executives who've spent millions, if not billions of dollars building up a security program. And then I go in and I go, so what are you doing to validate, test, and assure that your environment's working? Oh, well, we change our corporate security providers once a year so that we've got a fresh set of eyes. It's like, okay, well, you're definitely getting good coverage, but how much depth is there to it? So we'll talk about that a bit. Do you find yourself fighting fires? Constantly having to deal with an immediate need? One of my favorites was 2 years ago. Cyber insurance came out and told everybody that they had to have MFA. Guess what everybody spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on for the next 2 years implementing? Whether they needed it or not, whether they could even do it or not, whether it made a difference in their environment or not, they did it because insurance told them to do it. What are you focused on this year? This is a question that every assessor that ever comes into your business, every time anybody tries to sell you a security service or some solution, they're going to ask you that question. I'm going to teach you how to look at that a little differently. Do you have cybersecurity insurance and have you used it? Raise your hand in this room if you know your business has cybersecurity insurance. And how many of you have gone through an incident and leveraged that security service? Did you have a good experience? Did it work out well? Did they pay for everything? Best answer ever. For those of you who didn't hear him, he said, it was great because I didn't have to deal with it. I didn't have to be the one to do it. How many partners do you have? When you think about your business, everybody's got an MSSP, and maybe they do MDR, maybe not. Maybe you've got somebody else for that. And you've got somebody that's sold you software that helps make sure that sensitive data isn't being exfiltrated. And you've got somebody doing pen tests and infrastructure and somebody that comes in and does compliance. You got a lot of different partners you're working with, right? This is one of my heartbreaking ones. Who determines your final scope? Let's say it's a pen test, right? You've gone through, you know what needs to be pen tested at the end. You're going through procurement. You're getting ready to sign. Who's the person who actually decides that final scope?
Jody in front desk.
Usually, right? and the last one here is, do you have executive support? So, here's what we heard. When we do this and we go through and we visit with people, when I ask them, why do they do security testing? As many of you said, because we have to check a box. There's compliance, there's insurance requirements, maybe we have third-party agreements that say we have to do this testing and provide like a letter of attestation once a year. The problem with it is that there's really no value to that. It is literally the legally minimum viable solution that you could possibly be doing to check the box. It does not mean in any way, shape, or form that you are secure. So why do we continue to make that an acceptable goal? We perform pen testing once a year. Heard a lot of people say that just now. That's awesome. That's, you're scratching at the surface. A little, maybe. I go to the gym once a year and work out. You know what that looks like? This is one of my favorites. Like this video, if it'll play. Oh yeah, there you go. I'm the guy in the red shirt going, it's horrific. But it's seriously, if you're saying that you're pen testing once a year, it's the equivalent of this image. You're going to the gym once a year. You are not going to get swole. You're not going to get buff. You're not going to get toned. You're showing up at the gym once a year to say, I went to the gym this year once. We change our provider yearly. As I was bitching about earlier, I hate this. If you've got a good provider and someone who's providing quality work to you, depth, they have knowledge of your environment, they understand the business operations, the process, the practices, the things that help you drive, why the hell would you get rid of them to start back at ground zero the next year? The old excuse used to be, oh, I get a fresh set of eyes on it. Well, that was okay 20, 25 years ago when security services companies had like 3 people working for them. And you didn't want to have the same 3 people looking at something every single year. Now you look at the larger service companies that exist out there, and it's hundreds of testers who are continually improving their approach, their methodologies. Don't waste a relationship that you have. If it's something where you want another set of eyes to come in and do it, then hire a third-party company that comes in to do that once a year, test to validate that the partner that you're working with or working through this stuff with is being successful or efficient and effective in what it is that they're doing. Fighting fires and focused on immediate needs. All I hear when I hear people say that, we're busy right now, we're bombed, we've got this project, we're not going to be done until the next quarter for this is the way it goes. I see places that operate extremely expensively. They're a ticking time bomb, slow forward progress if any progress is being made from this type of an approach. The issue that exists here is that if you are busy fighting fires and focusing on immediate needs that are being dumped down on you, how can you ever do any kind of like actual proper planning around how you're going to mature the overall size and area of the environment, right? This works okay in small, young, immature environments where you've just got to get shit done, right? Like the scramble approach from getting development or code pushed out. We've all been there and done that, but this is not the way that you want to approach corporate security. This year we're focused on multi-factor authentication, identity management, security awareness, whatever it is. Like I said before, my frustration is that you're spending all your time, your resources, your people accomplishing one project versus making big moves. I've watched organizations that have gone to this kind of an approach, specifically one of the largest medical organizations in our country had a challenge following a compromise, and the way that they addressed it was really focusing on identity management because they had kept getting phished and their VPNs had kept getting abused. So they went out and they created this huge identity program and spent all this money and all this time and all this effort implementing this, and it looked so good, so clean. They did all this user education and awareness, and then they had an executive click a link. So hundreds of thousands of dollars later, countless of thousands of hours of employee time, everything else, and one person makes a mistake, that should not be something that unravels your entire security program. Oh boy. This is not you guys. I'm not picking on you in this audience. I'm picking on executives because I hear all the time, I'll be like, what are you doing to protect your company? Oh, well, we have cyber insurance. That's not protecting your company. That's protecting your ass and maybe your wallet a little, but it's not protecting your company, your customers, any of your sensitive data. You don't know, you don't care, you don't get it. All the different companies that you work with, infrastructure, right? We talked about how everybody's got all these different companies that they work with. Problem is that when you do that, there's an overall lack of focus, communication, and connection, right? I hear when you tell me this, that you are likely dealing with audit fatigue and you are probably dealing with assessment and audit time over time, quarter over quarter, month over month, and it's always checking a box for compliance, always chasing some requirement that's been given to you by somebody outside of your organization or somebody who's selling you a policy. It's not the way that you should allow or drive or build the support structure that's keeping your company running from a day-to-day operational standpoint. This is a huge one for me. I've been pen testing since 1994. And I cannot tell you the number of times where we go in and we talk to a customer and they tell us all the wonderful things that they're worried about. They name all these high-value targets, data sets, databases, all this other stuff they want us to go after. And then legal will review the contract and go, no, we're not hiring somebody to come in and fuck up our company. We don't want you to come in and just destroy what we've been working on and doing. And no matter what method you take to try to talk through this, these folks don't work in IT. They don't work in security necessarily. And a lot of times, if you are lucky enough to have a legal team that gets it, they still like to have a lot of control and oversight in how things are going to be executed and operated. I know that this is just beat to death, but the true point behind this is, tell me, everybody in the room, how much do hackers who are attacking you give a shit about a scope of work? You've all heard it, right? We all know it. So when you're paying me all this money to come in and conduct an assessment for you, and you've got awesome people out in the field doing this work and trying to find all these problems and issues that exist for you, why would you limit the way that they operate or function? Why would you change their methodology or approach? So the biggest reason I show this slide and really talk through it is to make sure that you understand when you're the champion within the business and you're the person bringing in resources and partners to do this work, you have to steer your executives and your legal to make sure that they don't manipulate and destroy the contract and the work that you've been putting forth to be able to conduct and do this work. This one's a good one too. I can't get executives to understand the problem, risk, impact, or challenge. How many of you have said this? Be honest. I've said it a lot. The truth is, usually means you can't get budget that you need to get your projects or your programs done. You don't feel well supported. And the uglier part about it is you're probably speaking the wrong language. For instance, if I am a CFO, I control all the finances within a great big huge organization, and it is my job to prioritize and think about how we are distributing and leveraging and using that money to get work done. If I have somebody from my IT security division come to me and say, hey, I need to pull a bunch of people off this project. We're going to drop $55,000, and I'm going to bring in 3 different engineers to help us across our 12 domains, make sure that we're not doing stupid things like pushing out broadcast protocols that we're not using, and we have a lack of SMB sign-in, a whole bunch of low-hanging fruit. That CFO doesn't have a clue what I just said. Doesn't get it at all. He heard 55 grand in pulling people off projects. So if you learn how to change the way that you approach the conversation based upon who your audience is, you can get a lot more traction, right? If it's something where I go to the CFO and instead I say, hey, in the last security test we did, there were 3 critical vulnerabilities that were identified. It's going to take us probably about 2 weeks worth of effort across the 12 domains with some testing, but we're going to be able to mitigate this. It's going to cost me 6 resources, $55,000, but look at this security change that it makes within our environment. We literally can go from this fake risk score to this fake risk score. Now all of a sudden, the CFO is super pumped, and they're happy to give me the money because I've just shown them the return on the investment that they're making for the work effort that we're about to do. All right. This is usually the face I make. Like, it's really hard, right? You got to do your poker face, but you're sitting there in a boardroom with all these people who own this company, who've spent all this money, and you ask them some simple questions. It's really hard not to do this. Because especially when you realize that what you're doing is you're talking to people who, obligatory dumpster fire picture, are really in a dumpster fire type situation. So, why is it hard? It's not hard. We're just learning. A lot of this stuff is new. And I don't mean new as in the number of years it's been out there. There's multiple people in this audience who have done this work who can tell me, we've been doing this for 20 years. You have. The problem is it's new to the rest of the business. We keep forgetting that although this stuff seems old hat to us and is something that we deal with and do every single day, for the rest of the business out there, IT security and bigger, integrated programmatic security at enterprise level is probably something that they have never truly done. They've copied a SANS template. They went and found and replaced client with their company name, but actually going through the process of developing policies, procedures, programs, and guidelines that actually make a difference and have impact in their environment, that's something that's typically quite new. On this slide, I give some tips here that are kind of straightforward. It doesn't really matter what we're studying or learning, they all apply. But the pictures for me do tell a bit of a story. I was probably about 8 years old the first time I watched my uncle pull off the shot trick that you can see up on top of there, right? An old bar trick with the card. How do you be able to separate it, not spill a drop of the two, right? And I started learning that a lot of these bar tricks were nothing more than like social hacks, right? Where you just had to know the trick. Once you'd seen the trick done, then it was easy to go ahead and repeat it and replay it. That kind of got me into where I liked a lot of that stuff. So when I was a kid, I really thought magic was cool, and I really thought, social engineering and anything else like that was just neat as shit. When I was young, clear back in the 90s, we called it lying. But now it's one of those things where it's turned into a great career capability. So I win at a lot of things in life, remembering that little card trick, like shot glass slide thing that my uncle had shown me. And I approached lockpicking the same way and failed miserably, right? Lockpicking was one of those where I thought I could just watch somebody do it, pick it up and do it, no problem. And I sat there and I broke picks and I ruined locks and I did a whole bunch of horrible stuff. And then I sat down with some of my friends who were extremely great at lock sport, and an hour later I was able to pick just about any of the basic locks that they had for me to play with. It was nothing more than me understanding the internal components and function of how a pin tumbler lock worked. And once that had been shown to me once, the concept of lockpicking seemed stupidly simple. I find that corporate and enterprise security is the same way. A lot of the stuff we're going to talk through in the next half an hour is really about this kind of stuff where you can learn these lessons, and they may seem very weird or very challenging the first time that you go at them, but once you've done them once, it becomes second nature. Surface mount soldering, right? Multi-pin, one of my favorite things. When I first got into hacking Xboxes, it was the kind of thing where you're using aluminum foil and all this stuff to try to get that one little pin perfect, and I couldn't ever get the chip to set on the mount correctly. And then I had somebody come by and teach me, oh no, you can just slap a whole bunch of solder on there, put some ribbon on top, suck it up, and hey look, it's perfect almost every time, right? Same kind of thing. It truly was magic the first time I saw it. It was like, how did you do that? Like when I watched him spread the solder across everything, I'm like, you just destroyed everything I've ever done and worked on. And I had no idea that I was learning a new lesson. And as soon as he showed me the way it worked, it blew my mind. I was like, I cannot believe I've never seen this before. Same thing with programming. How many of you out there code? Any level at all? I'm not asking if you're a developer. I'm just asking, can you write some basic script? How overwhelming did it seem the first time that you sat down to try to write something? Yet the moment you had a project and you had to Google and figure out how different parts of the code work together for you to be able to build a clock or whatever your app was, all of a sudden it just felt simple. It felt like it made sense. And you feel like all of a sudden you've picked up this skill or this trait, this capability. That's a lot of what we're talking through today. The key is that no matter how well you think you do, you're probably going to fall down, smack your head once or twice on this stuff. So you have to be patient with yourself, and you have to remember you're not going to get it right the first time, especially if this is something new to you. This kind of goes into the Nintendo Hard. How many people know what Nintendo Hard is? How many people remember Nintendo Hard? And a lot of hands went down. God, I'm old. So Nintendo Hard existed not because the games were impossibly hard, which a lot of them were, but Nintendo difficulty really, in my opinion, was the fact that you couldn't shut the damn thing off and come back to where you'd been. There weren't save modes. Like, I think Zelda Gold cartridge was the first one to have a battery and a cartridge that allowed you to save, and it was this world-changing thing for gamers. The top one I included here because Super Mario Bros. 1 is an incredibly difficult game. But if you know what you're doing and you understand the pattern and the rhythm that exists within the game, you can beat it in under 8 minutes, simply by knowing how to do the warp zones and knowing when to hit jump. It's actually pretty rhythmic. I've watched robots at this point be able to do speed runs of this video game. Yet the first time you pick it up, you probably couldn't get halfway through the first world. Mike Tyson was another one. Once you learned the rhythm of how he punched and how you could detect if a punch was coming, the game was stupid simple. Before that, you'd play all the way through the game, get to Tyson, and he'd just decimate you every single time, and you'd get all pissed off because you'd wasted all these quarters to get nowhere, right? But once you figured out the pattern, it was easy. Anybody recognize this game? Bonus points if you do. Nice. I am impressed. I didn't think anybody knew Bubble Bobble. Bubble Bobble was how I got in Nintendo Power when I was, I think, 12 years old. My neighbor and I were the first ones in the world to beat the game and to send a picture into Nintendo. It was excessively hard. Bubble Bobble was cool because it actually allowed you to get, when you would die, it would give you a 5-character like warp code, and you could go back to where you had started or where you had left off. It was, again, not a saving feature, but kind of a way for you to continue the operation and play through the game. The reason I bring up Nintendo Hard and take this time to kind of explain through it is I feel like in information security, we're in that mid-1980s, 1990s of where Nintendo was, right? They knew that they were going about it the right way. Everybody wanted their game systems, right? It was the hottest selling Christmas item. You couldn't find them anywhere. But they were damn hard, and the games frustrated people. And a lot of people jumped to other platforms because Nintendo wouldn't make it easier or didn't have a better way to go at it. We find the same thing happening in corporate security. We fall back on what is easy and the things that we've always done because it's the way we've always done them. But as you just saw with a lot of the best practices that we talked about that are examples of people having bad behavior and saying bad stuff, it really comes down to just understanding how to play the game. Flipping. So I was supposed to go forward a minute ago, so there's your slide for what I just was saying. But the key really being is figuring out better ways, figuring out patterns, figuring out ways to learn this stuff, figuring out better ways to do timing, project and program management, the way that you execute around this stuff. It makes it a lot easier. So when we go into big spends, little returns, the title of my talk is A Programmatic Approach to Enterprise Security. You notice how we haven't drilled into a lot of that yet? But the second part of it is how to not waste your security budget on shit that doesn't matter. And this is usually where I really upset a lot of people in the audience. So if you get mad at me, it's okay. Come and talk to me about it afterwards. I watch a lot of people spend a lot of money doing dumb shit. And what I mean by that, and by the way, I want to say this first off. I am not judging or talking shit about any of the companies or the providers or anything you're going to see from screenshot perspective on the screen. This is more about the talk around things, okay? I'm not bashing vendors. I want to say that flat out. But I go into corporations every single day. Q and I advise people from vCISO standpoint. We do security services. We do everything else. And everywhere we go, when an executive wants to show me how secure or not secure they are, what do? They put a Nessus dashboard up in front of me or some other risk scorecarding system out there, and they go, we have this number of vulnerabilities, we've seen this number of assets, this is our security health, this is our security posture. And it's like, no, that's your vulnerability posture on your technology systems within inside of your business and how limited was the scope of the scan you actually conducted. It doesn't tell me shit. Like, all it does really, honestly, most of the time is tell me how easily it's going to be to hack you, one way or the other. That's about the value that comes out of a vulnerability scan. Security scorecarding is another one. This is the hot thing in the industry. Everyone wants to come and sell you some solution that will automatically take into consideration all of these different things, and then they will create this magical scorecard for you that's usually based upon primary colors and single syllables because that's the only thing executives understand. And they treat you like you're stupid. And they go, you got a B. Good job, kiddo. And they pat you on the head. And you go, why did I get the B? And they go, oh, well, because this and this and this and this and this and this and this magic sauce in the background we can't tell you about, and this is all secret, and we can't reveal the proprietary scoring. And you go, well, how do I get an A? And they go, well, you could make this one a little better and a little higher. But again, it doesn't actually speak to the customer. One of my favorite things, Q and I just went through and did a big bake-off with a whole bunch of these companies. And my favorite questions to ask them were, how do you take into consideration mitigating controls within your environment? Okay, I get that you've got a system in your environment that's running an old dead Windows 98 operating system or some Windows 2000 box that has never been shut off. But then it's completely isolated, air gapped from the rest of the environment. How much risk is it actually posing in that scenario if no one can ever talk to it, if no one can ever speak to it, and if it's on its own standalone environment? Well, it's got a bunch of exploits that can't be fixed, so it's an F. No, it's not. And that's kind of the thing that I try to talk through with this stuff. My other favorite one is talking to them about accepted risk. Show me in this risk score where you take into consideration risks we have had to accept to operate as a business. Oh, well, you know, we can change the scoring and we can reduce the weight of this one where you said you did this, but, you know, and again, my point is all these solutions are supposed to be automated, but if you really dig in and you start asking the types of questions that you see on the screen here, you'll find out really, really, really quickly they typically don't go that deep and they don't actually have that much true value to helping you steer your organization. Reputational damage. I am as guilty as anyone. Before I start trashing on it, I'm gonna say that. Nickerson, Ryan Jones, and I, when we did our security practice back in the day, one of the things that we always tried to do to get executives to connect with why they needed to work with us was we would talk to them about the fear of getting hacked. And you'll hear this still today. Oh, if you get hacked, it's going to cost you this amount of money. It's going to cost this millions of dollars. It's going to cost all this. Well, it's not true. There's good papers you can go out there. Christoph wrote this wonderful one in 2021. They looked at a huge stack, 45 companies that were compromised between 2002 and 2018. You see the logos on there. All of those business critical compromises, millions, if not hundreds of millions, billions in the case when you look at things like Equifax, of records lost. How many of these companies are out of business today? So why as an industry do we keep focusing on trying to scare people through reputational damage? There's a lot scarier shit you can talk to them about that happens when you get compromised. How about like a $4.5 billion recovery cost to work with some company that you have to retain because you didn't have any kind of security practices or maturity in your existing program? That's the stuff you need to talk to them about, is the true impact of how it's going to affect them financially, operationally. These things matter. Don't tell them that their customers are going to be mad and they're going to leave them, because the truth of the matter is, over long periods of time, it doesn't actually have the financial hit that you would think it does. This is another one of those slides that makes people mad. I love it. This has been a big one for me too. Zero trust. I love the concept of a zero trust approach in any environment. Love the concept. But if you look at the bar graphs that's on there, unless you are some massive company with a massive budget and absolutely top of the world capable talent, you probably aren't even going to be able to find a partner or a provider that can actually properly help you implement, design, and deploy a zero trust solution for your environment. So where you have all these companies out there right now that are trying to pump millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of marketing dollars to you to try to sell these technologies to you, take the Pepsi challenge with them. Invite them into your business. Sit down at a boardroom. Give them 4 hours. Have them talk you through how it's actually going to function and work inside of your individual environment. And every single time they say something that doesn't make sense or couldn't work in your environment, make a little check on your paper. And at the end of 4 hours, ask yourself, do I want to choose this company to be my partner to help implement a zero trust approach in how we're operating within the environment? I'll tell you, after working with the largest companies in the world, there are very, very, very few people who actually implement and do this approach right. So for all the rest of us who aspire to be people like Google, Microsoft, these other types of environments, we don't have that budget. We don't have those resources. We don't have that knowledge. So it's the same thing like a little kid stepping up to plate at Little League going, I'm going to knock this one out of the park and I'm going to go play for the Dodgers one day, or whatever your favorite baseball team is. I don't do sports ball. But the point being is that just like that little kid, most companies are not ready to step up to the plate and have a 103-mile-an-hour fastball thrown at their head, right? They're not ready to play in the big leagues. And that's the same thing that we find out there in advising and working with these companies, is that a lot of executives will hear the buzzword, they like the sales pitch, they like the concept and the idea of zero knowledge, but then they come to us and we find out that they are wasting ridiculous amounts of their budgets really accomplishing nothing. So, finding a better way. I'm not going to read each one of these. You guys are all capable talent, hopefully literate. But it really is the key of the steps we take when we first walk in and we start talking to people and trying to figure out ways that they could do things more effectively, more efficiently, more valuable. One of my absolute favorite ones, Paul, myself, and a couple others were ranting about this last night at the speaker dinner, was shared knowledge. Siloing is, again, one of the worst things we've ever come up with in the information security industry. It was hot shit early 2000s to tell you, oh, I've got to segment all these different parts and castle moat mentality, and I'm going to push all this stuff apart, and if one part of the business gets hacked, it's not going to affect this part. Doesn't work that way. Great idea, great concept, not real. So when you start talking about ways to effectively do this, we'll go into it a little bit more here in just a slide or two, but it's really about trying to bring all these people together, all these ideas together, making quicker, smarter, more actionable decisions. And I've got one line on there that I'm not going to skip over, which is risk and budget focused versus vulnerability counts. Quit letting people say that a vulnerability count is the most important thing to you, because it's not. Sit down with your CFO and understand your budget, and all of a sudden you'll start realizing that budget impact is probably the number one defining thing as to how you are going to create a security program and whether or not it's going to be successful. I like that one. because it's true. We have a lot of customers who go out, spend their stuff, and then they come back and we do it, and then they're like, this is amazing, it's wonderful, we should have done this to start with. It's like, yep, but you didn't. So how much money did you waste getting to this point to realize that you shouldn't have rolled it your own? So very quickly, this is kind of how we go through it. When Q and I go in and we sit down with customers and we're getting ready to send our team in, we start talking to them about developing intimacy and understanding of who and what they are. So this is not, tell me about your Nessus scanners or how many you have out in the field. This is not the, I want to know all about the 0-day feeds that you're subscribed to and how many thousands of dollars you're spending a month for an email that you never read. Instead, it's, tell me about your business. What is your mission? Oh, you make sprockets? That's awesome. How are you the best sprocket manufacturer? Okay, that's cool. What's your vision? Where do you want to be in 5 years as an organization or 10 years from now? Like, where has this business come from? Have you been around for 147 years and it's family-operated business, or you were a military or government skiff in Herndon, right, or Reston? When we talk to them about this stuff, we start understanding the vision. The culture becomes fun, right? Can you imagine if I went in to a surfboard manufacturer in Southern California and I said, hey, we're going to deploy this NIST standard guideline. This has been already rolled out. Department of Energy uses this. It's got 560 different controls that each of the different things have to meet. Surfboard manufacturer is going to be like, dude, we come in t-shirts and like shorts at 10 a.m. in the morning. The fuck are you talking about? I don't even want to get out of my face. Same thing. If I walk into a skiff in Washington, D.C. and I go, hey, bro, what's up, man? I was just outside smoking. We were having a good old chat and shit. And you guys, the security's fucked up. So we've got some really good ideas on how to make it better. That's not going to float with the 4-star general, right? I'm going to get pounded out. So the first thing that you really need to do that's important of everything else on here, I truly believe, is understanding the culture of the business. We move into technology. Again, basic stuff, right? Inventory, asset inventory, capabilities. What's your technology debt? Who are the partners that you have? But we start understanding how the business operates. Now these sessions are not long. They're usually an hour or 2 hours long, where we talk through all this stuff. And we don't do it with a list of questions where we're sitting there checking something off each time. We have some guides that we use to follow to make sure we ask the right questions based upon what their compliance requirements and other things are within their industry. But the idea is to use these topping header, bullet points, whatever you want to call them, as conversational starters. And this allows us to then get deeper and deeper with people who have potentially worked at that organization for 15 or 20 years. They're going to know what's up. So why don't we leverage their knowledge and information? Shared knowledge versus coming in and trying to do it with absolute no knowledge, zero approach. That way when we actually speak to something like prioritization around remediation, it actually has value and weight. It means something. We understand the way it's going to affect or impact their business in a positive or negative way. Versus just saying, hey, Nessus says it's critical. It's got CVS and CVE and all this other stuff, and that means you got to fix it. That doesn't mean anything to an executive. But again, if I can go in and I can say, here's the value of making these changes, these small changes, these 3 things that you can go and fix inside of your environment are going to take care of about 40% of your overall security debt that you have within your environment now. All of a sudden, that C-level executive's handing me money. When we get into security, same types of approach, right? And then we move into adversarial conversations. Where have you been hacked? How have you been hacked? How did you respond? Have you had success, right? Do you have a good tested security and incident response plan that you know is validated and has worked? Have you seen it work? We go through each of these conversations, and just in doing that, that allows us to develop kind of a planning and a risk model that tells us what are the big things that the business is focused on? What is their big picture? What are their priorities? And I don't mean security priorities, I mean operational priorities, right? If I'm a truck company, it's about moving trucks. That's the priority. How do I enable that, right? We talk about big wins. Big wins, what I mean here, what are the small changes that you can implement, kick off, right? A group policy object, a missing patch. What are the things that are going to make a huge change in the overall security or footprint and have impact within your business? And then we talk through next steps and gaining acceptance. Acceptance is huge. If you don't have buy-in, clear the way up to the top of whoever's signing the check, you don't have a successful program because you have to have money, time, and resources to make this stuff work. Doesn't matter how good your ideas are on paper, if you can't execute them through support of the larger enterprise, it's meaningless. All of that buys into execution. We go through a continuous approach. We talk to the customer about how often they can handle the work that we're doing. We talk to them if they're going to handle it internally or if they're going to leverage a partner. These things help us really kind of start steering a program or an organization for a program for an organization or company in a way that is meaningful and makes a difference. One of our favorite things about doing this is that after we go in and do this first round, we hand them a report of all the different stuff that we want them to prioritize or work on, and we go back in a quarter later and guess what's great? Because of the way we've done the work, because of the things we've proposed, most clients actually do the remediation and implement the changes. Now I'll say that again, because I think you missed it, or most of you don't work in security services. They actually do something. Most of the time, if you run a pen test and hand somebody a report, they go, executive summary, bin. Because they've got some program, they're going to figure it out, they'll get there somehow, some way. If you write them a report that's 40 pages instead, and all of it is prioritized and talks about, the impact and the effect and why this stuff matters to an organization, now all of a sudden you've got something that they'll read, that they'll apply, that they'll build programs around, and that they'll support. So, I beat up on governance, risk, and compliance a lot, but the truth of the matter is it's important because you're legally required to have it, and because it has some kind of an absolute basic format of what's going to work for your business. So when we work with these organizations, we do talk to GRC. We do understand the compliance requirements they need to hit. One of the things that we try to do with our advisory service is we try to cross-map requirements and controls that exist from these different compliance requirements that are given to them. And that makes it to where instead of them having to conduct 4 or 5 or 6 different audits a year, we can do one readiness assessment that takes the various things into consideration from a maturity perspective of the business, and then they're prepared and ready when those audits come, versus it being rinse, wash, repeat again. Always ask yourself, why am I doing this work? Why does this requirement exist? Never, ever, ever let yourself answer, because I need to check a box. As long as you can get past this challenge, then you can probably actually define a pretty good set of controls and regulations that you will be able to follow that do apply to your industry and do make a difference. Playing together, like I said before, oh, that color is harsh. Sorry, folks. What it says, since you can't read it, is essentially bring in project management, bring in team members from all over your business. One of my favorite things when I tell companies to go out and build a security council or a security advisory council for inside their business, we'll go in first day and it's executive, 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 senior director, and leader. And I'll be like, where's your maintenance guy? And they're like, the janitor? And I'm like, yeah, you're a maintenance guy who's probably more familiar with the physical security and operations of this entire campus than anyone else that's sitting at this table. Bring him in. Where's your head of development and product? Bring them in. We want to understand how they're implementing a secure development lifecycle, how the code that they're pushing out makes sense. Bring someone in from every single area of your business. HR, right? You need an HR representative there. All of this stuff is key if you want success. Many minds, right? Bring them together and create a hive that makes this stuff work. Key points. Move away from one-off engagements. Don't just hire a pen tester once a year. Find a partner that's going to be somebody that can integrate and work with you, or develop an internal team that makes it to where this stuff is a living process, something that's continually happening, continually going on. When you look at the business, look at people, process, say it out loud, technology, and what's the D stand for? Good job, data. It's not just a 3-legged stool, it's 4. Data's key. When you eat the elephant, right, understand when you're going after all these projects, prioritize based upon the things that are going to make the largest positive impact for your business, not necessarily the things that sound coolest to your insurance company. That will really help you steer this stuff. And again, create what's right for you. Don't just adopt an industry standard. Going back to poking fun at lack of S&B signing, that vulnerability shows up in every vulnerability scanner as like a 3.2 CVS. How many of you pen test out there? Only a handful. For those of you who don't, lack of SMB signing or broadcast protocols is usually the way that pen test service companies break into your network within about 9 to 10 minutes of the time that they start the engagement. Yet we sit there and look at it on a vulnerability scan and see it as a medium-ranked, ignorable vulnerability. This is what I'm talking about not just trusting the industry standard on this stuff, but understanding how it applies to you. So, I've got just like about 5 minutes. This is usually propagated with a great big pretty picture of a place that we're going to throw a hacker happy hour tomorrow. Unfortunately, the venue that we're trying to do at has not confirmed yet. So if you find me tomorrow walking around the conference, I will tell you where tomorrow after closing ceremonies our hacker happy hour will be. I throw down a credit card, wine, well, and draft. The idea is to pull everybody together in a quiet place so you can sit there and tell awesome stories about things that you are interested in. Doesn't have to be computer related, it can just be whatever's cool. But do please come hang out for the hacker happy hour tomorrow. Talking about things that I'm passionate about, I absolutely, during the pandemic, have gotten lost in ham radio and SDR work and communication. I have a gold mine that goes 1,000 feet into the earth because we like mining for ore and going through the whole process of smelting it down into little beads. My house is an off-grid bunker on the side of a mountain with 50 acres in Colorado, 100% off-grid in every way. And because of my job, I'm able to write off Siemens Industrial solar controllers as a business expense for researching IoT. So lots of good fun. I had a Flipper Zero group on Facebook called Hacking with Flipper. Unfortunately, I can't invite all of you to it. It was 15,000 people strong, one of the #1 research groups on Facebook, and Zuckerberg's bots knocked us off the earth 2 weeks ago. Don't even have an opportunity to repeal it or say, hey, why did this happen? They just erased 2.5 years of 15,000 people's research. So keep that in mind when you go create Facebook groups for your friends. And then I'm also really hardcore into mycology, doing a lot of really neat research right now with slime molds and different types of decomposers. A bunch of our land got burned during the Cameron Peak fire, so I've got all these trees I've got to deal with. Instead of trying to cut them down and haul them out, we're using slime mold to break them down to dirt. Pretty cool stuff. So again, don't care if it's computer security related. Find me while you're here at the conference. I would love to hear the things that you are passionate about. And here are my contact points. Please add me, drop me a business card. We have a really cool webinar coming up. What is it, Keel?
It's not a webinar.
It's not a webinar.
It's not a webinar.
That's what it's called, by the way. It's not a webinar, even though it's a webinar with our team.
It's not a webinar.
But if you attend those, we're giving out a Flipper Zero on the next one. If you're in the audience, you have a chance of being one of the people to win a Flipper Zero. So come and check us out. And again, thank you so much for coming to Richmond. Thank you so much for coming to my talk.